Let's get together to co-create a breakthrough for freedom of energy, sustenance, healing, and regeneration of the human vessel. Welcome to FESIG, the free energy special interest group where science meets spirituality in the quest for truth and knowledge to free humanity and transform this planet into a paradise.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Right. Hi, welcome to FESIG's 98th meeting. Today is the 2nd of March, and we have quite a number of people here tonight. I would like to thank everyone. We have almost 50 joining us right now. I want to thank everyone for taking time off to choose to be with us. My tonight, it would be morning elsewhere because it's an international group. And I have my FESIG brothers with me. We have Dr. Fresel here, who will be co-chairing, and Pontus Hefscher as well. I think James is here too. Hi, James Rink of Super Soldier Talk. And we're going to have a wonderful session today. So I'm going to share screen so you can see the agenda of the meeting today. There you go. So welcome to FESIG. It is a science meets spirituality platform where we welcome all speakers who are most brilliant in what they do to come and help us, teach us, and so we can share what they know, and information, intel, skills, so that we can move forward with what we are here to do in our divine mission. So bear with us while we, while we introduce ourselves. If you are all raring to go and can't wait for the speaker to speak, because this is a meeting, so we have to go through the ramifications of the procedure. Right, so I'm going to share screen again because the share screen has not been, okay, right. Press, can you see my screen? Is that all right? Okay. Yes. I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of a problem here. I can't share screen properly. Okay, here we are. I'm going to share screen again. Okay, there you go. So as I said, today is the 2nd of March. It's our 98th meeting. And this is me, Crystal Gore. I'm the chair of this meeting. And we have co-chairs, Fresel, Pontus Hefscher, and James Rink. And our website is truevisionofpeace.com/FESIG.html. So we have today's agenda. The first session, we have our first speaker, Palden Jenkins, speaking on ancient sites. And as you know, Paulden was speaking in our last meeting, which was the 97th FESIG meeting. He's being the editor of the Planet of Choice, the only planet of choice. He was speaking how he got the book together, and he was the editor of the book, and that's the only planet of choice is the book that first came out that had made such an impact to everyone who had read it, and it really changed our lives because these were messages from deep space. And if you want to know more about that, do go to our FESIG YouTube channel and click on Paulden's video. You will learn so much of his wisdom and how he journeyed through the procedures of coming up with the super duper book called The Only Planet of Choice. When he was doing the editing, he was helped by the Council of Nine as well, and the people around him. And very famous names had actually sat around in a seance to bring these messages through a group entity called Tom. It's very fascinating. Right, so today, Paulden is talking about ancient sites, consciousness work, megalithic geoengineering, and earth cosmic energies, neolithic ancient sites, when stone circles were built, consciousness technology plug into earth energy and cosmic patterns. He has his new book that will be launched very soon. It's titled Shining Land, and it's based on these principles. And we have Dan Winter and me leading the forum with Paulden, well, we'll see how it goes. We play by ear. And then the second session, we have Fernando Bosa, who will be speaking on the art and science of holofractal creation. Fernando will be speaking with his partner, Akuda Melchizedek. And Fernando will be talking about identifying the quantum alchemy of energy, fractalization of thought, intention, and interdimensional cymatic configurations that result in consciousness expanding architecture that coherently mitigates heat, cold, sound, crystals, water, light, magnetism, plasma, and naturally connect with the Novus templates of master ancestor origins. So this is really fantastic. Do stay on until we finish this whole meeting, because there are 2 sessions. That's why I have to read to you the agenda of the meeting. And do pen down in your diary our 99th FESIG meeting, which will be happening on the 6th of April, 2022. Okay, right. So if you want to write to me so that you can be, or actually you can click on join us in our website, and you will be automatically be put in the database for getting invitations to join our meetings, okay, through a MailChimp out. And then you get the newsletter like reports of the past meetings, a description of the past meetings, and a video link on it as well, and so on and so forth. Okay, you get all the links of the speakers naturally, so you can check on the speakers later if you need to have more details that you could learn from them. And you can write to me, crystal@truevisionofpeace.com. Okay. Thank you, folks. And I would like to introduce Paulden once again, for the benefit of those who hadn't attended the last meeting. I would like to say that Palden Jenkins is a well-loved and accomplished author, renowned philosopher, and the editor of The Only Planet of Choice. He was commissioned to compile this life-changing monumental book in 1991 to 1992. Everything you ever wanted to know about the universe but didn't know who to ask, that book is what you ought to read. I have also invited the renowned prolific writer, philosopher, and inventor, Dan Winter, an author of numerous books himself. He has lectured on evolution of consciousness, sacred geometry, and coherent emotion. He founded many projects on these subjects, including science of peacemaking, the origin of negentropy, golden ratio, phase conjugation to the Planck sphere. To join us here, to join Paulden in the forum of his talk. Right, so over to you now, Paulden. We're all ears.
Do I have 45 minutes or so? Crystal?
Yes.
Do I have 45 minutes or so? Is that?
Yes, you do have 45 minutes or more.
Okay.
Can you speak louder, please, Paulden? Could you up the volume a bit?
Yes. Hello.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I believe that I won't be teaching you anything particularly new, but I think you'll be interested to see the way that I'm putting this together, because it might sort of connect a few things for you. And I'm going to be talking to you about megalithic geoengineering. And I live in an area in southwest Britain called Cornwall. And the area where I live has more ancient sites in it than virtually anywhere in Europe, in a very small area. And so what I'm going to be doing is talking to you about quite theoretical stuff, but using my local area and its ancient sites as a way of understanding it and focusing on it. I'm a historian and into geopolitics and consciousness things, and so that's my orientation. I'm not specifically a technologist as such, but we are talking about technology here, and consciousness and a technology which was working with subtle energy and with consciousness in an advanced shamanistic kind of way. That's my key proposition. And what I'm talking about is two periods in ancient British history, which are the Neolithic, the 3000s BC, and then the Bronze Age, which went from about 2500 to 1200 BC. And those were two different waves or versions of the development of this kind of worldview and technology. The first attempts were done in the Neolithic, then there was a crisis and a pause in the whole thing, and then it all cranked up again. And in the Bronze Age, what was happening in Britain with the building of the stone circles and all of that, that was all happening at the same time as other civilizations across the old world, in Old Dynasty Egypt, in Turkey, Mesopotamia, Harappa in Pakistan, Yellow River in China. I'm not sure about Central America and its timings, but it was happening all over there. There was a Bronze Age ascendancy. And the British version of it was very advanced in certain ways, but it didn't involve the building of cities and empires. It involved getting very involved with a technology which was clearly, in the perception of the people at the time, they clearly saw it to be an advantage and something which would help them in their lives. But they saw things in a very, very different way to the way that we do now. So I'm going to attempt to do a screen share and take you just through a few interesting maps and pictures to introduce the whole thing. So let's see if I can get this right. Sorry. I don't know how to.
Paulden, you hit the bottom, the green bottom in the middle, screen share.
Yes, no, I've pressed that. I'm just trying to look at to find the actual file I want.
Okay, yeah.
I've never done this before, I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem.
And I don't know what to do.
How can we help you?
Yes, I need to find the file. It's a PowerPoint file.
Okay. Stop share. You just click it down, and then you take up the PowerPoint file.
Mm-hmm. And open it.
And open it. And after that, you hit the share screen. Okay. You have it open on the screen.
Yes. I press screen or
share in the middle. Yeah.
I'm trying to find on the Zoom screen. I'm trying to find the one I should click. Oh, there. Okay, got it. Share. Okay. So we're talking, as I say, about megalithic geoengineering. Can you see the picture?
Yeah.
See.
Good. This is a classic stone circle built around 2300 BC. And this is a classic example of what I'm going to be talking about. I'm talking about the generation of higher levels of consciousness which are capable of activating different laws and dynamics in the workings of the universe. And the way that I think people were doing this was with technologies such as stone circles, because these stone circles are built with a flat side on the inside and a round side on the outside, more or less. And they reflect energy in. Now, what energy? Well, these things are sitting on top of what dowsers call blind springs, or in America, they're called water domes. And these are upwelling flows of primary water from the center of the earth, which are a product of the chemical reactions deep within the earth. They've never seen the light of day. And they are actually, I think, the original source of water on this planet. Comes from these chemical reactions. So they come up and then they hit a level which they can't move up again, so they spread out. And this creates an energy vortex which goes up to the surface. The ancients could identify where they were, and they made a stone circle to contain that vortex, to hold it. And the stones themselves are made of granite, which is 20% quartz and mica. It's 20% crystalline. And so this is what they were doing. And this is to do with building an advanced kind of what I'd call a PowerPoint in space. But the critical other issue, and one of my professions in the past is I've been an astrologer. And we astrologers, we're interested in interpreting the nature of time. And so they built stone circles at PowerPoints in space, but they would also make use of PowerPoints in time. And these were times when the other planets of our solar system in particular were positioned in certain ways that they would create a resonant thrum in the energy field of the Earth, and that we on Earth feel that. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. You've been in full moons where, for example, you couldn't get to sleep, and then you find out a day or two later, oh yeah, it was a full moon, you know, or you have a crisis, or there's an amazing atmosphere, or all sorts of things. And also, of course, this involves planetary lineups. Now, I'm not talking about puppets on strings here. It has a resonant thrum to it, which is a field of frequencies, and they are particular to each planet. And when the planets are swinging around the solar system, each at their own speeds, they're interacting with one another in a complex variety of ways, which sometimes is jarring and disharmonious, and sometimes it's flowing and harmonious, and there are all sorts of nuances to that. And so if you do consciousness work, concentrated consciousness work at a PowerPoint in space and a PowerPoint in time, then you can go a long way. Now, what's the proof in this? Well, I imagine that each of you has been to some sort of a very special place sometime in your life, which you could call a PowerPoint. And the remarkable thing that happens when you go to these places, if you sit down, spend some time there, something goes on inside you so that when you're going home, you're in a very, very different state to when you came. And usually it's to do with resolving problems or issues coming up. Sometimes people even have healings, or it can be paranormal phenomena, or it can just be a pleasant meditation or a pleasant chat. Or another thing is quite often you meet interesting people in these places. That's fascinating. There's one stone circle near me, which seems to really have a mind of its own. And what seems to happen there is that when someone's been there and they're leaving, someone else arrives. It's fascinating, and this happens many times, and many people have observed it. And so there is a detectable consciousness change even today, even if you haven't been through 20 years of druidic training. You know, you can feel it. Anyone with any sensitivities, you can feel it. And so, all right, this is Britain. On the left-hand side, you've got the various countries of Britain, the various areas, and Ireland. And this is the megalithic area. And Cornwall is in the bottom left. And West Penwith, where I live and where I'm talking to you from now, is right at the far end. And I live 2 miles from, 3 kilometers or so from a place called Land's End. And the next stop is New England and the Caribbean. And if you look left a bit, you can get down to Africa. On the right-hand side, this is a map showing the main concentrations of megalithic ancient sites in Britain. The size of them isn't necessarily an indication of the importance of each of them, but nevertheless, and some special places are the Orkney Islands here, the island of Lewis here, where there's Callanish Stone Circle, and these various places down in the west and north. And in ancient times, the center of activity was this, the Irish Sea and the Celtic Sea. It all happened around that sea. The part down here where London is and where England is was forest, dense forest, whereas this is different in the west. This is Cornwall, and these are the ancient sites in Cornwall. Now, here are a few clues, because there are thousands of them. The red ones are the most important ones. The yellow ones are all cairns or barrows, which is mounds of earth and rock, which are used for earth energy treatment. Around the edge of the coast, there's a series of cliff sanctuaries, cliff headlands, which are, in a way, they hold the energy. And you'll notice also there are some main areas here. This one, which is called Bodmin Moor, which is a highland area. And this one down here, which is called the Lizard, which is a plateau surrounded by cliffs. And then this one where I live, which is a very special place. I love it. So, and in the Neolithic period, at 3000 BC, basically there was stuff going on at these 3 places and all the rest was dense forest. The forest only started getting cleared when they developed bronze, with which you could plow the land and chop down trees much better and faster. And so that changed the landscape. And so the population moved into the forested areas. So anyway, so we're now going to move down to this area in the left, which is called West Penwith. And this is the topography of it. And I live about here. And this area here was the high area. Now the climate in the Neolithic in the 3000s was about 2 degrees warmer than it is today. And so the place to be was the tops of the hills, because down in the bottom, it was dense green forest. So people lived up here. And you can see it. These are the ancient sites in West Penwith. And you can see all this conglomeration up here, which was the main activity in the 3000s. But when they invented bronze in the 2000s, they could then colonize this area. And you'll notice they're very different. Up this area, there's a lot of yellow dots called, which are cairns. But down this area, there are lots of blue circles here, which are menhirs or standing stones. And there were some big stone circle complexes as well. One was here, and one was here, and one was here, and one was here. So those are the ancient sites of West Penwith. Now, how I got onto this was very interesting because I've been studying all this matter for 50 years, but I had a eureka moment. And I was sitting working on making a map of the ancient site alignments that had been discovered thus far by other people. I was doing it as my contribution to the research around here. And I was sitting there late at night and I was thinking to myself, well, there's Cape Cornwall, which is this one over on the left, just here. And there's St. Michael's Mount, which is this one over on the right, which is just here. And there are two islands, or semi-islands, with a similar look to them. And I thought, I wonder if there's anything going between them. So I got out a straight edge and I did a line across, and bang, they came to a bunch of barrows down here, which are on the hill just above my house, about less than a kilometer away, up on top of a big high hill. And this just really hit me. And so I started looking around and I found a whole load of other alignments. So I'm going to be talking to you about that. Here they are. This is very complex, but it works as a whole system. And what happens here is that they started with a basic landscape of natural features. And these natural features were the high hilltops, like here and there and around, which rose up above the forest. And then there were the headlands on the edge of the coast, like there and there and there and there and down here and there. And so, and what happened was they built ancient sites, man-made in ancient sites in between, and they built it according to a system. And this is very complex because, first of all, they plugged this system into underground water and the subtle energy of the earth that runs through water veins. Then they aligned these with, or some of them at least, with cosmic movements. So they aligned ancient sites to the rising and setting points of the sun and moon in particular at the critical points of their cycles. And these critical points are the solstices and equinoxes and what are called the cross-quarter days of the sun. And then in the moon, you get new moons and full moons, but you've also got various wobbles and shifts. And one of them is a 19-year cycle between what I call lunar maxima and lunar minima. And this is because the plane of orbit of the moon is 5 degrees different from the plane of orbit of the Earth around the sun. So that means that sometimes full moons, for example, can be very, very high in the sky, once every 19 years. We're coming up to one in, I think, about 4 years' time, a lunar maximum. And the ancients were very interested in this because if they could get an exact reading on these, it meant that they could also predict eclipses. And eclipses are the times when the energies of the earth are at their strongest and most transitional. And it's because the sun and the moon and the earth are exactly lined up. And on a total eclipse, they are very exactly lined up. Of all three of them start cross-resonating together in a harmonic hum. And when that happens, you get a quantum lift of possibilities in all sorts of different ways. And I think you all probably know what I'm talking about here in other terms, you know. And so this was one of the, so they plugged them into astronomical things, but they also aligned ancient sites very exactly. Now, I'm not sure about this, about why, but the fact is it's true. So an alignment across this map can be 15 kilometers long, and it might have 5 or 6 ancient sites on them, and it is accurate to within 2 or 3 meters, that whole distance. There are some alignments which go for 150 kilometers, and they are still accurate within 3 meters. They didn't have satellites. They didn't have theodolites. They didn't have helicopters. How the hell do they do this? I do not know. But there's one clue here, which is that the holy people of the time, proto-druids in this case, the shamans, when they were identified, when they were young, they went through a very focused training. And this was quite rigorous, and it went on for years. So this meant that by the time they were adults and in a way qualified in some way, shamanically and spiritually and psychically and whatever their abilities were, then they could go to levels of consciousness, especially working in groups. They could go to levels of consciousness which for people like us are an amazing achievement and usually a short-lived experience. But I'm sure you've had your moments of awakening, of seeing, of perception of things that you don't normally perceive. You know, I'm sure you've probably experienced things like that. All right, so anyway, those are the alignments. This is an example of natural alignments, because this is this place called St. Michael's Mount, which is now an island, but it's actually been made an island by sea level rise, and it became an island around about 1700 BCE, and we can tell this because there are remains of forest around it under the water, which have been able to be radiocarbon dated. But there are interesting alignments here. For example, from St. Michael's Mount to the most important stone circle in West Penwith to one of these cliff headlands called Main Castle. Or there are other ones, such as the one I pointed out from St. Michael's Mount through Portraya Barrows to Cape Cornwall. And it goes on like this. The ancient sites were lined up on natural sites. And in that way, they were plugged in. Now, I'm going to give you a hypothesis here. This is a hypothesis. Damn. And I've even forgotten the name of it. Sorry, I'm a cancer patient and my mind gets brain lag every now and then. It's an Einsteinian, it's a quantum physics issue. And Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. I can't remember the technical term for it, but it happens when, for example, the atom is broken and parts fly off and they have no medium of connection after that, but they nevertheless behave totally in harmony. And so it's as if they're programmed with the same algorithm so that they operate separately, but together. And you get this in other ways. For example, the synapses in the brain, the connection between the left and the right brain, are not actually sufficient to process all of the signals that go between the left and the right brain. And the interesting thing is that in surgery, if the transmitters, I've forgotten the word, between the left and the right brain get severed, then the left and the right brain still function quite well with each other. And this is to do with this remote connection. Another bit of interesting evidence that people have researched is twins who got separated at birth and who grow up without knowing that they have a twin. And then there's been all sorts of research where these twins have been reunited in later life. And the fascinating thing is that their lives have panned out very, very similarly, even down to the timings of things happening. Say both of them having a divorce at the same time, or both of them getting a new job, or both of them having a special experience. It's very interesting, uncanny. So I think this is another form of way of connecting up natural and man-made energy sites. Now, we use lines on maps, but they aren't actually lines. They're just for us as a convenience, and they're a way of testing the accuracy of the location of these sites. But they aren't actually lines. It's just that they are objects which are lined up in a straight line across, say, the top of a table. And the fact that they are lined up in a straight line creates a certain kind of thrum, which doesn't need a connecting medium. And that's what I think is behind these. And why is this? It's because they were trying to build an integrated system. And this is a good example of one. This is the stone circle called Busconnen, which you'll see a picture of in a while. It's a lovely stone circle, and it's built as a megalithic bullseye because it's located amazingly between headlands like this one, and that's a headland and the highest mountain in Penwith, and this one, and that goes over to a bunch of islands as well, far out, called the Scilly Isles. So there's this amazing fortuitous coincidence of the location of natural sites such as headlands, hilltops, and natural features like that, and also the place where they built ancient sites. And Busconnen, when you visit there, you'd think, why on earth is this here? But actually, it's a megalithic bullseye in terms of the earth energy. For example, this line here between these headlands, these cliff sanctuaries going through Busconnen, that's aligned on the summer solstice sunrise point down to the right, and it's the summer solstice sunset point up to the left. So that connects in that alignment into cosmic energy. And this is what it's all about. It's about connecting up the earth deep down. You're sitting on top of these blind springs, which is bringing energy up from the core of the earth, and you're hooking it into the solar system and the cosmos. You're hooking it into the various sites in the landscape, sites and natural features in the landscape, and then at auspicious moments, you do consciousness work at one of these places. Now, these alignments are quite sophisticated, and here are some interesting ones. They're all within 3 degrees of one another. And I'm not exactly sure what these are, why these are here, but they do align to the rising point of the star Sirius, and they also align to the lunar minimum south rising point, I think it's called. But it's difficult to tell why they were there, but this is amazing. And this involves ancient sites and natural features. So you get things like this, but you also get another thing. This is where our rationality starts getting busted open, because these radial alignments you can see coming from this hill called Carnbray. It's on the left here. There's a picture of two Neolithic tor enclosures. The first one is over here in West Penwith, there, but the second one behind is this one, and it's called Carn Bray, and it's a really big, powerful, energetic hill. And the fascinating thing is that these headlands, which are at the ends of alignments with it, you can get an alignment which goes from one headland there to one headland there. And so this means that there's some sort of order in nature here. There's some organizing force here, which the ancients they managed to identify because they couldn't manufacture this. They could only enhance it by building ancient sites, man-made ancient sites. And so these were the tor enclosures, these were the starting place. These rose out of the forest. And these were where people would gather on full moons to do tribal rites. And they were widespread. The density of population was really low. And so they'd meet up at full moons and special times. And all the folks would get together. They were all related to one another anyway, probably, you know. So they have a deep genetic connection. So these were the first ancient sites here, which were built around about 3,700 BCE. And the interesting thing here, that there were rings of stones built around the tops. And this was the beginning of the concept of the temple or the sacred site or the special place. And these are the cliff sanctuaries or cliff castles around West Penwith, the headlands. These are mega energetic too, and they're very, very special. They're, you know, if you go to one of these places and just sit down with a flask of tea and some sandwiches, it's just uplifting. And so these were the natural energy system of this landscape here. This is an example of one. This is a telephoto picture, and the headland at the back just here, which is called Trerindinas, that's actually about 25 kilometers away. This is a telephoto picture, but this shows what these headlands are about. They have power. You feel it. Now, these are cairns or barrows. Now, these people were working with complex networks of Earth energy, and they were seeking to enhance the subtle energy fields of the Earth. And this is one of the technologies they used, which is the cairn or the barrow. And there are two kinds of barrows. One is the solid barrow, which has nothing inside it. It's like that one or like this one. And these were built around 4,200 to 500 years ago. They've sunk quite a lot because it rains a lot here and they get eroded. And these are ones which are on the top of one of the prominent hills of Penwith. But there are some of them also which have chambers in. And this is an example down on the bottom left of a chambered cairn. Now, I think these were rather special places for forms of subtle energy work. Traditionally, archaeologists think they were for burials. No, they weren't. The people of the time used to cremate each other and bury each other in perfectly unceremonial ways. It was mainly a matter of disposing of bodies. And you never find corpses in these things, although sometimes you find an urn which has the bones of like 300 people in it. And these are tribal genetic memory sticks. They are things whereby the tribe could feel its connection with an eternity through the bones. And there were just little chips of bones, all stuffed together in an urn. And then I think these were places to go to die. Conscious dying was, I think, at least for some people, the norm in those days. and you would go there when your time was done, and that's where you would go. Now, there is energy here because these things are parked on top of the intersections of underground water energy streams, and you get a vortex of energy. And so they build a mound on top, which acts as a kind of a battery or as a kind of a buffer to smooth out the variations, because the energies fluctuate sometimes quite wildly, and prompted a lot by the movements of the planets. But I'd add another thing here about what causes Earth energies to fluctuate, and that is humans. The issue today from a subtle energy viewpoint is that we now have nearly 8 billion stressed humans on this planet. And this has a massive energy effect on the planet itself. What's the evidence for this? It's easy. What is the most flexible, malleable part of planet Earth? It's the atmosphere. What is changing rapidly, particularly in terms of turbulence? You can argue about temperatures and stuff, but turbulence is increasing. And so in a way, one of the solutions I'd propose for dealing with the climate crisis is that humanity has to calm down. And here we have it being acted out this very day in Ukraine. We've got to choose something different. I don't need to tell you all about this, you know all about this, but you know, there's something very deep and profound about this. Stone circles, there are 4 surviving ones. There were probably 10 back in the good old days, but they've been scratched and damaged and all sorts of things. Now, what is a stone circle all about? Well, they're a concentrated energy field, where a natural energy field coming from below and flowing up above, it's part of the breathing field of planet Earth, and they channel it and contain it within the stone circle. And then when they want to do some work, they zip it up. What do? They have 200 people there. And the people outside the circle, the members of the tribe, they get themselves into a good state. They probably take what I'd call mind medicines, because these are in the days before Christian religious guilt over things like consciousness changing drugs. They then were medicines. And so, but also they had their techniques, which would be chanting, breathing, dancing, stamping on the ground, visualizing things, just like Tibetans or, you know, other faiths teach now in meditation. And so they'd work up the energy, and there would be people inside who are highly trained in working with things such as communication over long distances. These are a bit like a Faraday cage. Generally, it is the case that the background radiation inside a stone circle is half that outside. So it measures up on Geiger counters. And so what they were doing was they were building this energy field at power points in time, significant full moons, solstices, what have you. And they would do this consciousness work. So communication, another one would be healing. We have been investing vast amounts in tackling illness recently, and they had issues too. And they worked with this shamanistically by invoking the powers of healing and all sorts of things. Then there were questions of working with nature and raising the level of nature such that the climate would be agreeable and the land would be fertile. The cairns, which I showed you on the last picture, you could look on them as biogenerators because the soil in those cairns is insanely fertile. So they can be looked on as biogenerators of some sort to raise the fertility of the land. Then they use this technology called menhirs, that's the Cornish name, or standing stones. These are big mothers of stones, several tons quite often about 8 to 12 feet, what's that, 3-4 meters in length. These ones have been brought only a few miles, but they have been brought a few miles, and that was done somehow. Some of them are really big, such as these. This is a set of double menhirs at the Mary Maidenstone Circle. They are very high, actually. They are about 2.5 times the height of a human, and that's the bit that's above ground because there's 1/3 of the stone below ground. And they're quite amazing too. This one here, for example, is propped up on small stones, so it doesn't actually touch the ground. This one here looks like a seal, and lo and behold, 300 meters away, there are seal caves where seals breed and have their pups. Bottom left-hand picture, I thought I'd show you that with a smile, because there we have a standing stone on the left, and on the right, we have the main air traffic control beacon for the east of the Atlantic. When you fly over here, your plane downloads and uploads its information through that beacon. And so I just thought that was a fascinating juxtaposition of technologies over the thousands of years. So that's that. And so I think you might be getting here what I'm talking about. These people, they did seem to have technological ways of working with subtle energy and consciousness in order to carry out quite advanced scientific things. And I'm talking about the stuff we're messing around with now, which is genetics, artificial intelligence, energy and power, fertility and reconstructing the ecosystem. And we're also now into space research, so that they were doing their form of all that then, 4,000 years ago. They were using a different kind of technology. Now, I know that you guys are, in your various ways, plugging into the modern version of these kinds of things, because when we're talking about free energy, we are talking about breaking the rules of physics as most normal people know them, even quantum physics. And you probably know and understand that there is a connection with consciousness and etc. It goes on. And as we all know, everything is related, much more so than we can even really imagine. But I think the interesting issue here is that if we look at the future, the long-term future, say the next century, we've got to crack a big problem on planet Earth. And it's a problem not only with the ecosystem and the climate, it's a problem with the humans. We are deeply, deeply damaged. And this is part of the issue. Unless we overcome our damage, our psychological damage, such as believing that other humans can be enemies, which is a really strange belief, as you probably know.
The other
unless we get
person
over
has
these
call
things-
captions enabled. Please start speaking.
Unless we get over these things, we won't master the ecological, technological, and other issues that are going on in the world today. You seem to have lost video of me, but there we go. And so, and I think what excites me is that the public is not ready for this kind of thing yet. But on the other hand, it's over the horizon. And we're talking about another generation when you and I are dead and gone, or most of you there. I'm going to be gone within a few years. But there's the basis here for something to do with the next step, which comes after the time when we have cracked the issues around energy, pollution, and the grosser issues which are troubling the world today, and war as a current one, and disease, and all those things, economics, you name it. What fun. But there's the next step after that, which is where we start getting into the real reconstruction and healing. My hope and prayer is that this is where we will be going by the end of the century. But who knows? We face a big unknown. But this is where I think this kind of thing and the kind of research which you people are doing and other related things to this is where they will come into their time. Humanity isn't quite ready for this. But on the other hand, I think many of the seeds of the answers have come about during the last 50 years and during the last century or so, or perhaps a bit more, since Victorian times. And so we're on that way, and we're in this very testing time at the moment where we humans are being tested to whether we really do want to make things right or not. This is the big one. It's the battle for the hearts and minds of humanity. And I believe we have a lot to learn from the ancient people, because one of the interesting things there was that they come from an earlier time of history and their psyches were not as damaged as ours. So it has some value to refer back to people like that, because it helps us refer back to a time when our psyches were less hurt, less damaged. And this is important because, for example, I've worked in conflict resolution all my adult life. And the important thing here, which was established in the 60s with flower power and everything, is that it does come down really to inner composure and feelings of love and understanding. This has geopolitical import. This has economic import. It's a key thing today. And so there's value in referring back to those people, because I think they can help us project forward to our further future. And I won't go into that, but I think it is inevitable as part of that further future that we are going to be meeting the neighbors. And to do that, we're going to have to rise to a level where we can square with them. And this involves getting in touch with areas of knowledge and development, such as the work that I've been doing and the work that you're doing, which humanity is not currently accepting. But these things will help us rise to the level where we are able to meet the neighbors. And now I shall end with the final thing here. And the final issue is that we are the neighbors.
Thank you, Paulden.
Thank you.
Oh, this is so thought-provoking, so deep. We were enthralled in the wisdom and the depths of your mullings over the ancient technology that is so different from what we are doing now. I mean, if you're talking about technology nowadays, it's like it even tastes metallic.
Yeah.
Yeah, metallic technology.
Yeah.
So I think
Soviet
I would like to
scientists were getting
invite
into
them to say a few words about this wisdom of yours that you had just divulged. Dan Winter is the author of numerous books himself, and he has lectured in the evolution of consciousness, sacred geometry, and coherent emotion. I think there is something that he might want to say here that is in line with what Paulden is sharing. So he was also talking about the origin of negentropy and the phase conjugation, Planck sphere, and all that. So there is some parallel here. Dan, would you like to pick up the microphone and say a few words?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Well, just, Paulden, I think your visuals were wonderful, and the ancient British wisdom there, you are the embodiment of it's fabulous. I just would like to suggest that we know a lot more now about the electrical engineering of those connections. When Korotkov went to where the Kogi phoned ancestors and learned how to measure sacred space, and we now know that it was harmonic inclusiveness capacitively, and those same nodes, which are very measurable, is the physics of where Korotkov proved telepathy was possible. And that really is the electrical description of these nodes, as you call them. The correct electrical term actually seems to be longitudinal interferometry. So specifically, when Korotkov measured capacitive harmonic inclusiveness, he called it charge fractality. It's really charge distribution efficiency at those nodes. What he was measuring was the sites where electric charge was compressed efficiently, and where that compression, which you described rightly as something you can feel, it's beautiful. We just think we actually can measure this in several different ways now. That harmonic inclusiveness, for example, when your brainwave harmonics, which is a golden ratio cascade tuned to Planck, match the Schumann harmonics, golden ratio cascade tuned to Planck, it's called phase conjugation. That non-destructive compression converts the transverse component of the electromagnetic wave into the what's called longitudinal, incorrectly called scalar or torsional. And that compressional wave has a superluminal component already measured to be golden ratio times speed of light. And that's the beginning of the connectivity. So when in conventional physics, they say action at a distance is caused by entanglement through an Einstein-Rosen bridge, the more accurate term for that is that entanglement perfected is called embedding or perfect nesting, which is the problem golden ratio phase conjugation solves. So the compression you get at those nodes makes a longitudinal still point. And remember later, Tom Bearden proved these longitudinal EMF waves are literally the physics of gravity waves. So there's many implications. One, for example, when the ancients put all these pyramids precisely at the dodecacosa nodes, exactly like the nodes you're talking about, and aligned them, they actually successfully built a global power distribution without wires, which was this longitudinal interferometry grid. Tesla didn't get it right. He had the frequencies wrong and he had the nodes wrong. But actually, when you get it right, which are on the lines that are correctly in your pictures, Paulden, beautiful, actually what you get is a place where the charge of that longitudinal interferometry is available, literally the connection nodes for your light bulbs. Another aspect of this actually is, you're right, in those burrows, like in the cairn, where they proved they were not burial sites, just like the pyramids were not. What they also proved was what they were using them for was to cause seed germination. They were charging their seeds. And you can measure 50 to 200%. Actually, we're doing that now. We take Therify.net longitudinal plasma, zap the seeds, and hemp get 200% growth effect. Because the seed grows if it really sucks. I mean, if it's imploding charge. And so zapping the seeds just before germination with a centripetal field has a dramatic effect on agriculture, which was central to their culture. So these were seed germination. And you're right also, Paulden, about the conscious death. Very good insight, very appropriate there. The physics of conscious death is the same physics of lucid dreaming, actually. The physics is, for example, the Therify.net coherent longitudinal plasma replicably triggers lucid dreaming, which is the best way to predict successful death. Specifically, what happens is when the longitudinal coherent EMF propagates from the aura, it's called the Ba from the Ka, or the Kesjan, or the rainbow light body. It's actually a longitudinal propagating compressional wave that inhabits the array. And that is the physics of the entry into ancestor memory, sometimes called songline, dreaming track, collective unconscious Akashic record. And so when we now know the physics of triggering lucid dreaming, it's very predictive about the physics of successful death, which is why the sequence of visions you see at death, the Heinrich-Klüver form constants, is actually lattice cobweb tunnel spiral, is just the sequence of geometries to implode, compress, and DNA braid, and why successful death requires a black hole, literally a compression node. So the same physics that Kozyrev proved is the only way you got military quality telepathy at the kind of nodes that Paulden just graphed for you beautifully, is also the same physics of where you can enter and exit that array. And the other, and I won't carry on here, but the other last thing I would say is the ability to enter successfully, either lucid dreaming or successful death by surviving compression and achieving distribution, sometimes called heaven or planes of Sharon, is identical with the physics of pure intention. Namely, when you go to that place of compression, as Paul was saying, do spiritual work. If you enter bliss or death with anger, it doesn't compress well. It's actually 1/7 wave ratio. So it's not a shareable wave. So that means, it's the movie Ghostbusters all over again, or Flatliners. Whereas when you've sorted your memories, which is how you prepare for bliss or death, then you can do compression, which in psychology is called the implosion process or perfected collapse. In fact, they call it collapse process. Both Einstein called it perfected collapse, and psychologists call it perfected collapse, because it's the same physics. It's literally implosion. So I could carry on, and I appreciate the opportunity here. This is fun, and maybe we should turn this into a dialogue. But I love it that you represent so well the British tradition of identifying these ley line geometries. And I just suggest that now we know so much more about electrical engineering. We, for example, we have 3 different ways to measure those sites that Paul just graphed, and one of which is flameandmind.com/life force. And we just take the same transducer used to measure brainwaves during bliss, and you can tell whether a tree is going to survive, live or die by that harmonic inclusiveness and implosion. And you can tell whether a human is going to have bliss. So you can measure these sacred sites, and we've actually proved it now in biologic architecture, goldenmean.info/architecture, and bioarchitects.net, which is the electrical engineering of biologic architecture, which beautifully leads to I think it's our next speaker here, Fernando, which is, the kind of physics of biologic art. You take the same material they use to make those dolmen, which are called super high dielectric material, which make charge permissive, charge distribution efficiency, super high dielectric organic materials. That's why the layers were organic, inorganic, just like you said, Paulden. It's implosive capacitance that's generated. It's really the physics of orgone is implosive capacitance, for example. And that then defines what building will cause a seed to grow or a child, which is really, now we have a very good electrical curriculum for defining and measuring success in biologic architecture based on those terms. And we have bioarchitects.net, a global consortium of biologic architects doing exactly that, turning biologic architecture into physics, which is a perfect extension of this work on geobiology. Anyway, I won't carry on. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you, Crystal. Anything I can do to help chat or take questions, as you like.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for your input. That is lovely. It's so spot on here. Actually, when you're talking about Paulden, when you're talking about ley lines, they intersect. And where they intersect, it's a sacred site. And most churches and places of worship are built on this intersection of ley lines, aren't they? So they are sacred sites because they have high energy, high concentrations of electrical charge, don't they?
Well, that's one of the ways of identifying it, yes.
Yeah.
This is a very interesting thing because traditionally here, people do this by dowsing, which is an extremely intuitive, sensitive thing. And it's very difficult there have people who have sincerely tried to develop machinery which will somehow pick up the same stuff as dowsers pick up, and there's something about the range of frequencies that dowsers can pick up, which still we haven't fully understood. It's quite multidimensional, but it's very interesting. But dowsing obviously was one of the ways. I mean, I've known some very advanced dowsers throughout time, and hobnobbed with them, but I tend not to dowse myself, but I'm more of a psychic. I tend to get impressions when I'm at places, and that's where I get my information. But it's fascinating, all this.
Yeah,
and
I heard of a renowned dowser, a gentleman here, can't remember his name, in the UK, who uses dowsing rods to douse to make markers of the ley lines of the whole country.
Yeah.
Do you know his name, Paulden?
Well, he could be one of various people, but I
Yeah,
think
and then he wrote a book out of it, and he's got all the markings of the intersection, the ley lines,
Yeah.
where he lined up from the megaliths and the
yeah,
well, you know, the monuments.
there are all sorts of people working on this. You know,
Yeah.
one of the areas I didn't actually mention was about climate work as well, because the thing here is that this is where menhirs come in, because these can be looked on as conductors, and they're plugged into underground water circuits. And so what happens here is that they even out the extremities of energy between the atmosphere and the earth. And it is these extremities which cause turbulence. At their most extreme, they cause lightning, for example. And so what happens is that the menhirs, they even out the overall variation of climatic and earth electricity, bioelectricity, you could call it, or psycho-bioelectricity. And in doing so, they will tend to moderate the climate and balance it up. And so I think that this is why I use the word geoengineering, because I think that this could be a viable way of getting the climate to self-correct by helping its own turbulence on an energy level.
Thank you, Paulden.
But you know,
I pass the microphone over to.
Well, just
oh,
if
sorry,
I might,
Dan, you want to say something?
well, just to say that, you know, when Lovelock proved that Gaia was self-organizing, we later proved that the Schumann harmonics, which are the brainwave harmonics for bliss, are precisely phase conjugate to Planck. And that's called the origin of biologic negentropy, the title of my book. So smoothing out actually is the onset of self-organization, the physics of which is precisely what we predicted the result of implosive charge collapse. I would also mention that, you know, the world's leading geobiology center here, Stefan Cardino in Lausanne, that he actually published goldenmean.info/geobiology, the actual frequency power spectra differentiating Hartmann, Curry, Pei, Palm lines, and what frequency most deflects them and what metal most deflects them and why. So, you know, like I say, the physics of this grid engineering has evolved greatly over the years. And the tools they use to measure them, including the old Russian IGA, what they call torsional, are effectively tools to measure longitudinal interferometry, just as I was saying.
Interesting. Right, I'll pass the microphone over to the co-chair, Fres.
Thank you. We have some interesting questions that have come up, and so I'm going to relate some of these. When we look at these stones, Paulden, are they resonating in the line of, can they be struck and have a tone like ring like a bell, or do they have a rock sound? They just like your standard rocks?
Yes, they do. There is an acoustic element to them. This hasn't been researched a large amount, but it has been researched at certain places, particularly the stone circle of Avebury, which is the largest stone circle in the world. And they have found that rocks are resonantly tuned, and that they will respond both to striking, but also to chanting, the right kind of chanting. It has been measured, you know. So yes, there is something about that. But again, as you probably know, you know, everyone's volunteer and everyone's doing the research in their own time. And so the research can't be as big and systematic as it would be nice to be.
Okay. We seem to.
Right.
Did we lose Paulden?
Sorry? Did I
Have
mute
we-
Paulden? No.
Oh, okay, he froze, okay. His
Okay, he
his internet
froze.
is a little dicey at times, okay. You're sitting on
Right.
too big of an energetic field, Paladin.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
messing with the internet.
Well, I'm on a rather remote farm as well.
Anyway, can I invite Dr. Lilia Valitova to say a few words about how it's done in Russia? Did you, Dr. Lilia Valitova is the daughter of Najib Valitova, Professor Najib Valitova, the renowned inventor from Russia. Yeah. How was it like, Lilia, in Russia, in the ancient sacred sites? Were they being used as communicators?
Yeah, I found the connection to Archaim, the stone circle in South Ural Mountain, where I was born. And the Archaim became so famous. I have a question. Do you know about Archaim and how? No, because in America now, where I live, it's very popular subject. They look for Archaim information and they can. I don't think they know so much. My dad did photographs of Archaim, about 40 photographs of and portraits of people who live there. They restored from the skeletons, and like, I have to release the book probably with photographs at least, because it's similar. And I want to quote what you're talking about that a little bit with your name in this book. I had an idea, if you allow me to do so. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Lilia. Right, back to you, Fres.
Super. We know that in a lot of the religions around the world, there is the mind-altering substances that are used in practice. On these stones in your area, is there the equivalent of what would look like a bird bath at the top, a vessel that would almost hold water carved into the stone?
Not exactly on the stone circles, but there are natural sites where you get these amazing bowls which form, and those serve that purpose so that water falls into them but never touches the earth.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And also, I don't know if you study the ideas of Victor Schauberger, but I would theorize that in these kinds of places, that's actually where water is created. You know, what he calls juvenile water, I think.
Yeah. In Schauberger's work, they talk about non-energized water and water that contains an energy.
Yes.
And it's motion that picks it up in the rivers and streams and rocks, and it's lost in the lakes and in the ocean. It dissipates out. And the water that we get from our wells that comes straight up is very poor energetically speaking, and according to Schauberger. So
yeah.
And so that's why I say these vessels, there's several ways that they would be able to say, if it's water that's contained in them, if the stone is up, what I alluded to earlier, has a harmonic frequency to it when struck or infused with voice, which is a vibratory frequency, this would be transmitted into the water.
Okay. Yes, it would.
Yeah.
Okay.
I must say, Paulden, you are a brilliant photographer. My goodness, the pictures are so beautiful. I'm not surprised if a whole group of FESIG members were to suddenly flock to you, going to visit you for such beautiful, beautiful sights, beautiful. Right. I think we have an urge to visit you soon, one day. Talking about health, Paulden, please don't think that you go so soon, because I believe I've been talking to Jim Decode. All right. He's talking about the, well, I asked him, when do you think the military alliance will roll out the mid-bids? He says, well, we can't say, there's no I can't put a timestamp here. He says, I can't do that. But the technologies will be released soon enough when humanity has woken up. There's enough in the quorum to be able to do that. So once that happens, the advanced technologies, the healing technologies come out, Paulden, you'll be fine. They will put you on the maid bed and scan you. Everything will grow back, restored. You get younger as well.
Well, perhaps. I'll still be the same self, and I get a bit fed up with myself sometimes.
Well,
It'd be rather nice to have a new start.
We can't afford to lose good people like you. We've been losing so many lately.
I'll pop up at another time.
All right.
Get rid of Palden that easy. Come on, you can't get rid of him that easy.
No. He's a survivor, all right.
We have one, I'm going to bump back in here since we have a word that needs to be put into the recording so that it is clarified, and it's quantum entanglement is the word.
Yes.
And not only in the planes that we are in right now, and we have the separation, as you said, where you can have objects that move together and things like that. Time and space, the quantum entanglements are also forward and backwards in time. And you brought up a notion of we're agitated as humanity in our psychic worldwide. But if we take a look at the history of Britain, it has a very, in the near past, quite a vicious and torso, conflict built into it. And does that imprint onto these stones and these sites also?
Well, certainly there is this concept called place memory, which is the memory that is deposited in places from events that have happened, and certainly the subsequent history of Britain as an imperialist nation, as a maker of war, and as also as a source point of the industrial world, has undoubtedly affected the overall energy field of these islands. I'm very concerned particularly about electromagnetic radiation and the effect that it has when you've got 65 million people buzzing away with our technology, and the effect it has on nature and the whole of the earth. I would even theorize that our electromagnetic technologies are one of the causes of climate change. That's another matter.
Well,
yes,
talk
so
is
I'd agree. I'd agree
talk
that
is
the ancient
certainly
sites
very-
have been affected.
Yeah, very inspiring, very refreshing, Paulden. It made us technologists think about the ancient technology, which is so simple and which is so plugged into nature, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. I would like to introduce you, Paulden, to Dr. Boris Dragin. Boris is a healer, and he's in touch with some of the most amazing inventors of the most advanced healing technologies, right, Boris? Perhaps you two could get together if you could exchange contacts on the chats.
Yeah.
That'd be nice. Yeah.
Hello.
Is it good to ask a question? I have
Say that
agreed.
again.
Yeah, carry on, Boris.
Is it good time to ask a question, John?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I've seen a black and white photo of what appears to be Stonehenge, and there is a crane, and one of those from the top is it was not out of any vertical stones. It was the horizontal one.
Yeah.
It was lifted, and there are people who claim that Stonehenge is not as old as it's been claimed. is just a funny story or
Say that again, the last bit, please.
okay. So I am confused. I was just thinking of asking you if you have any information. Is this hoax of some kind, or how would you characterize it?
Are you talking about the moving of stones?
I am talking about a black and white photo, probably taken in the 50s. And on this photo, you can see the horizontal stones being
Lifted up.
either lifted or it was on the way down to be placed where it should be.
Yes, no, that I've been involved in an interesting experiment myself with a modern stone circle builder. His name was Ivan Macbeth. He died a few years ago, and he has built modern stone circles. Now he uses modern technology, like, you know, big JCBs and things like this, but we've also experimented with manual work, and I've worked in a team of 10 people, and we were able to move 5-ton stones for about 600 meters and get them into their slot, turn them over and get them into their slot exactly. And how did we do that? We did it with a mixture of technology that was logs for rollers, and we built a sort of a sledge that the stone was resting on, and we had ropes. So we had the technology, sort of simple technology, but also we were all quite developed people who've worked together for 10 years or so at the time, and we got together and we worked on our energy. We sat on the stone and meditated on it. We chanted around it. We hugged it. We drank tea together. We did, you know, we worked ourselves up. And I can tell you that it took a long time for us to really get clicking on this, synergizing on this. But when it worked, it really worked. And I have felt one of those stones much lighter, and as if it has a will of its own. If we were totally focused and if we were on form and everything was right, then we could just get that stone rolling and move it and then tip it into a very tight hole. And it was amazing when it worked, and it was terrible when it didn't. But in ancient times, the people would have had far more training, far more focus, and many of them would have been related to each other, and their minds were not as chaotic as our minds are. So they would have been able to develop this kind of synergy, and you can see it with workers in Africa when they're singing together in the fields, and they're doing physical work. You can feel that energy, you know, and there's the whole principle here of more than the sum of its parts, and many hands make light work. You know, it does actually work. The energy of, say, 5 people is not just 5 times 5 individuals, it's far more, if they are focused and synergizing and clicking with one another.
I'm going to jump in here real quick because there's a question that
okay, I finished.
Morris had put up, and I'm going to go between you two guys because there's an internet problem. I imagine, from what I understand from what he's asking, is about the restoration of Stonehenge years ago, and so that not all of the pieces are where they are today, and some of the parts that are in there are fabricated with concrete and stuff. So the stones that you're working in your area haven't been messed with for restoration as much as possibly some of these other sites.
They've been very sensitively worked with. Some of the stone circles have had to be partially restored. There is debate in Stonehenge about whether it is exactly done right. And there's a growing movement around Stonehenge which might, in the end, get this corrected. But there's a difficulty really with correcting these things because we don't know exactly what was in the minds of the people who built them. But yes, it's true that Stonehenge has been restored with bits of metal and concrete. And I think there are some inaccuracies to it. And it is also a major tourist site.
Right.
Thank you.
Can I interject? Unless
You
you
go right
have
ahead.
not finished.
Floor is yours.
I think James has a question for Paulden. It's been quite a while in the chat. James, speak up.
Well, hello there. Yeah, so my question is, like in the TV show Outlander, it alluded to these these stone circles were being used as a form of a portal. Do you have any information on whether these stone circles were portals, and would they have actually been activated maybe prior to the last pole shift, which would have altered the ley lines of the planet?
Yes, is the answer. They are portals. They are potentially high energy special spaces. You had an interesting slip of the tongue. You mentioned crop circles, exactly the same. The principle in crop circles is that although they have wonderful physics to them in terms of the design and the lay of the corn and all this kind of thing, the key issue in a crop circle is the energy field inside the empty space. That's the key issue. And the key issue with something like a stone circle is not the stones, it's the space inside it. And so that's what needs to be done. If there's any restoration done, there needs to be some sensitivity to the resonance field in the stone circle in order to get it right.
So has anybody draw any ley lines to intersect the crop circles? Have you seen that, Paulden?
There has been some work on that, and there is a definite connection between crop formations and ancient sites. But there is also the wonderful thing with crop formations is that every time we think up a neat theory about how they work, there's a new crop formation which is laid down, which says, yes, but, and there's always something new. Or it can also say no, or it can also play games. Whoever is creating these things have an immense sense of humor. They're very advanced intellectually. They're exceptionally good teachers. They're very patient with us. And very inventive, very inventive. And if you want one bit of proof that they're not man-made, if they were man-made, then someone would be copywriting the designs because there would be money to be made out of it. And because that's what humans do.
Right.
But these
Thank
are
you,
totally
Paulden.
copyright-free, fresh designs.
Yeah.
Thousands of them.
I think we need to move on to the second session now. We've got to close very soon. Got to go around the table. Yeah. Has anybody got any impertinent questions to ask Paulden? A few last questions. Over to you, Pontus, because you hadn't said a word. Is there anything that
I'm listening and passionate, so thank you.
So what do you think of the ancient technology of the high energy concentration areas of the intersection?
I have felt it here in Sweden, and we have one here 100 kilometers from where I'm at, and it is really strong. Yes.
Yeah. Well, Sweden actually has the northernmost prehistoric mound in the world at
Yeah.
a place called Vendel, just north of Uppsala. And I used to actually live at Vendel, 60 degrees north.
Yeah. And you have one also in Koseberga, just near Ystad.
Yeah. Yeah, there are plenty of sites around Sweden.
So James, what does the SSB, I mean, through your experience, did anybody in the SSB talked about stargates and portals that are coming from stone circles?
I mean, that's typically that's what it was used for. But I mean, everything got changed with the last pole shift. So the question is, where are these portals going to? Probably some other alternate reality. Maybe that's where Avalon was with the tales of Merlin and King Arthur and all that. But then again, also King Arthur probably wasn't. There's evidence that it did exist. If you go look up a cosmic agency, she actually has a report about King Arthur and all that. Yeah, so it's quite fascinating. But I think there's also other realms like fairies and elves or even gnomes live, and you have to. There's probably ways you can go through these portals to access these realms. But I was just wondering, you know, if Paulden ever encountered any evidence of other elementals out there, like little orbs, because I've seen orbs out and there's an area in here in North Carolina called Terra Nova where there's supposedly there's a bunch of fairies, and I've been out there and I saw these little orbs moving around in the woods. So yeah, what could he comment about that?
Yes, no, there are plenty of traditions here of what we would call paranormal phenomena and apparitions and all sorts of things. And quite a few sensitive people today, when they spend time in a stone circle, for example, they will get interesting things happening, time warps, funny sounds which you can't identify. Some people might see other people's auras. I mentioned earlier about you can meet some incredible people in them. It's sort of very chance meetings, you know, or you know, yeah. And so you do get paranormal phenomena. You get interesting weather things happening sometimes as well. There was one where we were in a stone circle and we did a Roman ritual invocation of Venus, and with a true manuscript from Roman times, and we finished it, and it was a really exhausting and quite special time. And when we finished it, we're all holding hands and we closed the circle. And what happened was the sky cleared and there was a crescent moon with Venus bang in the middle of the crescent. And that is the kind of magic which can happen when you get into this kind of thing. You know, people were just wowed by that we weren't even aware that Venus and the moon were going to conjunct that evening, you know. So it's fantastic, all that. So yes, you do get unexplainable phenomena of all sorts of different kinds. And also ancient traditions of fairy folk, or in this area, they're called spriggans.
If I might, on the science side, that the compression would be called actually a plasma domain, and that's what enables what's called fairies to propagate, even the orbs. And then further compression, which becomes implosive, propagates the longitudinal array, and that is what's called a portal, actually, which is why when the ETs set up the physics of the portal, they often use what we would call a sacred site, because there's already implosive compression there. So when phase conjugation becomes more broad spectral, that's what a portal is. It's essentially a lucid dream at higher plasma density. And the send receive point is determined by the identical frequency signature of the send to receive. We're doing more of that on our channel, James, but you see the connection then between seeing the elementals because of the plasma coherence of the compression of the node. And when that plasma implosive compression actually reaches that like liquefaction point, use the movie Stargate, that's because the conjugation is perfect there. And the charge inertia is actually liquefied and propagated. So the physics of portal is instructive, and actually where, you know, Jodie Foster began the lucid dream is a good indication.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. I think I would like to invite Fernando to have a last say before we move on to your presentation, Fernando, because I think you are as a bioarchitect, you are building on sacred sites as well, right?
Yes.
Fernando.
You know, Paulden, thank you so much for having the depth of soul to connect with so much of this higher consciousness through your presence here on earth. And I honor that, and laying out the platform and the foundation to what is next. So the commentary that I would have on what you have shared is coming up next. What is that next dimension of consciousness as one fractal of this work?
Fantastic. Thank you, Fernando. I think that is the we will close this session now. That's it,
Well,
right?
thank you very much, everyone, and really nice to meet you. And I'm glad. I hope it was interesting.
Oh, thank you, Paulden. Press, do you want to have any last say before we close this session?
I think this is a wonderful place to wrap this up, and I want to thank everybody who's been in attendance, and thank you, Palden, and it's back to you, Crystal.
Yeah, I don't see any impertinent questions, so I think we can close now, right? And there being no other business, this first session of our 98th FESIG meeting on the 2nd of March is now adjourned to the second session. Thank you. Thank you, Pontus. You can stop the recording now.